Hello again everyone, welcome back to my YouTube channel, Cliff Dixon of UKIP Hillingdon and the candidate for Hayes and Harlington. Things have been hotting up since we've resumed campaigning after the break in memorial of the Manchester victims, and last night I went along to support our Uxbridge and South Ruislip candidate Elizabeth Kemp at the hustings at Uxley Baptist Church. We weren't supposed to be having a candidate for Uxbridge and South Ruislip. Gideon Osborne, in his first week as editor of the Standard, did a lovely piece on page 6 to say that we were backing Boris. Unlucky Gideon, you've only been in the job a week and you're already pushing fake news. But it was quite an interesting event. I enjoyed it, and I'm sure Liz did as well. It's the first husting she's done as a parliamentary candidate, and she did very well. Boris didn't turn up and was roundly pilloried, certainly by the Labour candidate, for not doing so. So what did we learn from last night? Well, we had three Remainers up against Liz. There was a question on Brexit, and it was really funny to hear some of the answers. The Green candidate has decided that, according to their manifesto, we need a second referendum on the terms of the deal. Well, it's probably not slipped your notice, but it may have slipped the Green Party's notice, that we've had a referendum, and in the £9 million leaflet that went to every door in the country from the government at the time, it stated that if we left the European Union, we would be leaving the single market and the customs union. The Lib Dem, Labour and Green candidates last night were all arguing that we need to stay in the single market. That is absolutely suicidal, and I'll explain why. I actually fired a question in from the floor, and I did ask them that if we do need to be in the single market to trade, and it would be a disaster, why are 7 of the 10 largest exporters to the EU not only not in the single market, they haven't even got a trade deal, so they do it on WTO terms. In fact, there are 180 countries around the world that also aren't in the single market, and every single one trades with them. It just depends what terms that you happen to have negotiated. None of them seem to have any faith at all in our country when it was pointed out that we can do our own trade deals. The Labour candidate turned around, and it was actually quite funny, and I had to challenge him from the floor on it. He turned around and said, well, the UK can't get trade deals. If we were part of the EU bloc, we would have so much more bargaining power. How can we expect the UK to get trade deals with the US and India and China and Brazil? And I had to point out to him from the floor that actually the EU haven't got trade deals with those four, and they don't look likely to get trade deals with those four anytime soon. I just got quite a blank look for that, but I'm used to that. I must say I was impressed with the passion of the Labour candidate. I just didn't agree with a lot of what he was saying. So that was one of the issues that I brought up. The 7 out of 10. The fact that the EU doesn't have a great amount of trade deals. Some of the stuff I didn't get the chance to put in, where they were saying that we won't be able to influence things within the EU when it comes to trade. Well, actually we will, and we'll be able to influence it a lot more than we can at the moment. For instance, you keep hearing that the EU standardise trade, that they standardise we have all these different regulations. So for instance, things like car safety glass, I'll take for an example. Well, those regulations didn't come from the European Union. The safety glass regulation, for example, came from an organisation called UNECE, and UNECE is all 50 countries in Europe, not just the 28 in the EU. The EU has one vote on UNECE, the same as little Liechtenstein. If we get out of the customs union, we get out of the single market, we take our place back on UNECE, and the UK has exactly the same voice as all the remaining 27 members of the European Union. It just baffles me that these people have no vision for the UK outside the EU as a globally trading, outward looking, independent nation. Are you trying to tell me that we cannot do our own trade deals? Say for instance with Canada, which has been dragging on for years with the EU and still isn't signed. They've got similar legal systems, a common language. They are effectively our Commonwealth kith and kin, and the EU has taken over 8 years to get a trade deal. Do you honestly think it'd take us that long, guys? And would WTO rules, if we don't get a trade deal, be so bad? Well, I don't think they will actually, because if you look at the reality, we are on a trade deficit with the European Union of over £60 billion a year. Any tariffs imposed on us under WTO rules would actually impact the EU far more. For instance, the German car market, 30% of all the vehicles on our roads come from Germany. Do you honestly think the Germans are going to want tariffs put on those? They'll be beating a path to the door of Angela Merkel, screaming at us to get a trade deal. So let's just have a little bit of faith, guys, yeah? And the Green, well, that was another thing as well that he looked at me blankly about when I challenged him from the floor. He turned around and said that we need to be in the room negotiating Article 50. Well, mate, you haven't read Article 50, have you? Because the reality is we have a negotiation team, but they're locked out of the room while the other 27 member states cook up what they're going to give us. And it's what suits them, not what suits us. So they come out, slap their deal down on the table, take it or leave it. Well, no deal's better than a bad deal. And we got a bad deal in the EU, and I'm sure they're not going to give us a great deal outside. So don't be scared of WTO rules. It's the fallback position. We'll make more money on tariffs than they will, and we can do our own trade with the rest of the world. And the great thing about that is we can also, as well as trading with the rest of the world, we can help the developing world to trade their way out of poverty. I'll give you an example, the coffee trade. The Germans made more money on the coffee trade last year than the whole of Africa put together, and that's because of EU protectionism. They make sure that there's no tariffs on the raw material, on the raw coffee beans, which are the ones which is obviously very high intensity, low profit. But the minute you try to refine it, the minute you try to package it, they smash the tariffs on. So as a result, the Germans make all the big money on it, and the Africans don't. Well, we can now do our own deals with the African nations. We can go direct to them. We can help them trade their way out of poverty, and at the same time, we'll end up with cheaper coffee for it. I think that's a win-win deal, don't you? So the other things as well that did come out, everybody's talking about housing. We all agree we've got to have more housing. But the problem you're going to have with the other parties, where are the people coming from to build them? We lost a lot of people out of our housing trades in 2008 during the slump. They found other jobs. We need time to upskill our workers. So the UKIP policy on this is, let's look at modular homes like the ones they're building in Sweden and places like that. They're inexpensive, they're easy to put up, we can site them on brownfield sites, it makes for affordable housing for our youngsters, and it doesn't distort the housing market. So we can do that. While we're doing that, put in the vocational skills training for our youngsters to bring through our next batch of tradespeople without having to bring in more people to do the jobs, putting more pressure on housing, more downward spiral on wages. So what did I find out as a brief summing up of last night? UKIP, as I knew already, are the only party with costed policies who believe in our country and have a proper vision for the 21st century. Well done, Liz, for putting that across. You did us proud, and I look forward to talking to you all again soon. Thanks very much.